Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. It's a little bit sad, although this is going to be a great interview. This is going to be positive and wonderful, but it's sad because summer's swan song is over in a couple of days. It's going to be Labor Day. And so chronologically, this is the last weekend of pure summer, and it is sad. I didn't get enough sun, so be it. But what's even better is this interview with Peter Del Vecchio. And Peter and I have had this concentric commonality, synchronistic journey, and the primary ingredient of Peter and I is the fact that we're sons of Rutgers, loyal sons of Rutgers. And Peter, actually, chronologically too, we kind of went to Rutgers almost at the same time. I'm a little bit older, and Peter's started in early '70s, and but over the last 10 or 15 years, we kept on bumping into each other. Peter is completely immersed as a musician, a trumpet player, a composer, conductor, and I had gone to some events, and Peter was there, and then the Pièce de Resistance. Peter conducted. I may get this wrong, I may get it right. On an alumni orchestra. It was a big event. A couple of years. It was a year. I think it was last year. But anyway, I attended virtually. And it was wonderful because he conducted, and I think the last piece they played was something that you composed. So and then even better is that we actually sat down last week and really got to know one another, and so many more elements of commonality. The spirituality of us both is haunting and so similar. But Peter's journey is intense. I mean, intense with the yoga and the healing, and his teaching and Scarborough Fair, which we discovered that is another element of binding us. So there's so much to unpack and to talk about. And it's funny, I composed and I sent it to Peter, a whole script, things we wanted to talk about. It was like pages long. We're focusing now. This is edition one. We're focusing on some of the key things of Peter and some of the things he's doing now, and we'll get to the other stuff down the road. So, and the official title, I always like to say the official title of this, Peter Del Vecchio, and more synchronicities. I worked for 25 years for Leonardo Del Vecchio at Exotica Group and Claudio Del Vecchio. So that it was just even more endearing for me to continue working with another Del Vecchio, which was such a major portion of my life. And I am who I am because I spent those 25 wonderful years with the Del Vecchios. So anyway, Peter is a graduate of Rutgers. He also has a master's in music. He's a life coach, former yoga monk, author of The Art of Being Human. We'll talk about that. He's a composer, conductor, performer, naturalist, and a nature photographer. And this is coming live from Virginia. So a little bit lengthy on the Johnny Carson monologue, but it's important because you're important. And so, you know what, Peter, how about doing a little bit of introduction, talk about your childhood and through high school. Take it away. I'm so
Okay.
glad you're here.
Thanks, Cal. I really appreciate it, and welcome to everybody who's able to see this lovely interview. So yeah, I was born on December 5th, 1952, in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I grew up in the little town of West New York, New Jersey. People always say, "Why is it called that?" Well, it's if you've ever been into New York from the Lincoln Tunnel, that's in the town of Weehawken, and the next town up on the Jersey side is West New York. We pronounce it West New York, but a lot of people say West New York. Anyway, it's directly across from the Hudson River from New York City, Maine, Manhattan. So I grew up playing in the dirt in the park and look up and there's the New York City skyline. So I grew up there and went to school because I was born in December. They sent me to school before I was 5. And then I skipped a couple of grades and wound up in high school at the age of 12, which was very weird. Uh, Intellectually, schoolwork, I could do it. I was just a little prepubescent, chubby little Italian kid. And it was, people say, oh, that's really impressive. And yeah, I understand why people say that, but it was also a big challenge being in school with hairy old 18-year-old men. And I'm like a 12-year-old child, so it was, think about gym class. And back then we had to take showers after every gym class. So there was a lot of daunting stuff, not the least of which was, I wasn't even interested in girls at the time. But by the time I got to be the end of my junior year, I was 15 as a senior, turned 16 halfway through. So I did have a wonderful relationship or two before I went away to college. So I um, wanted to play the trumpet as a kid. When I was growing up in fourth grade, I wanted to play the trumpet when everybody else was starting their instruments. And we did not have any money to speak of, really. And so my parents said no. And the reason they said no is because trumpet's too expensive. Um, it's too noisy. And because we lived in a two-family house in a block, and we have a violin. So play the violin. So being a dutiful young Italian kid in the 50s, I said okay. I played the violin. I didn't really enjoy it. So after about 4 or 5 months, I stopped doing that. And so I didn't do any other music per se. So I got to high school, and I figured, well, I still want to do music. So I joined the choir, but I was only 12. So my voice hadn't changed. So what does she do? She puts me in with all the girls. Well, that was weird. And so then I couldn't sing the high part because my voice was starting to change. And then I couldn't sing the low part. So I quit chorus. And then one of my really good friends, Stephen Valero, we're still very good friends on Facebook. He was a year behind me in eighth grade. And he was a good trumpet player. And he also ran track and he was an athlete. So I said, hey, Steve, you're going to come to high school next year? You're going to play band? And he says, no. I said, why not? He goes, I said, you're so good on the trumpet. And he says, no, I want to run track. I want to focus on that. So I said to him, well, what are you going to do with your trumpet? And he
Uh,
says, why, do you want it? And I said, well, how much? And he says, $5.
wow.
So what, even poor little old me had $5 to scrape together from bringing back bottles and all that. So I got my first trumpet for $5. And Dr. Ezekiel Levy, who's the band director at Memorial High School in West New York, New Jersey. We called him Doc. He's hooked me up with the assistant band director, Steve Christian, and I got trumpet lessons at school for free. So my parents couldn't say it was too loud. They couldn't say it was too expensive. And I already gave up on the violin. So I did that. And within a couple of years, I had gotten to be the best trumpet player in the school, maybe because I started later, and maybe because I had the acumen for it, whatever. And I had my first trumpet solo, and then I studied with a real good professional trumpet player. And by the senior year, I was learning The Flight of the Bumblebee by Harry James, and I wound up doing that for my high school senior solo. And I saw the Rutgers University Marching Band at the Tournament of Roses parade in Pasadena, California, on January 1st of my senior year. And I said, "Oh, that's what I want to do. I want to go to Rutgers. I want to be in the band, and I want to be a band director. That's what I want to do." And so that's what I did. I went to Rutgers,
So
and
you were, and this is amazing for me. You were 16 when you
yeah,
arrived at Rutgers College. Uh, and what's really interesting, historically speaking, when you arrived at Rutgers College in 1969, uh, it wasn't co-ed.
correct.
So
It wasn't co-ed.
tell me
Yeah.
about that whole undergraduate Rutgers experience.
Social thing. Well, I was in the dorm. I was in Demarest dorm for my freshman year, although actually three freshman, sophomore, junior years, and I was actually president of the Demarest dorm for my sophomore and junior year. And one of the cool things about being president of the dorm uh, was that in those days there were no cell phones, of course, and there was only one telephone in each section of the dorm. But when you were the president of a dorm, you got to have a university extension phone, a real phone that you could use for phone call in your room, which was unheard of back then. That wasn't why I ran. But the other thing I did is I worked at one thing I feel kind of proud about is I worked at a pharmacy in my junior year, and I was able to get prophylactics, condoms, three different kinds for cost, which I then provided at cost to
Oh,
the kids in the dorm, which I'd like to think has prevented diseases and AIDS and whatever that might have been going on back then. So that was one of the things I ran on. And guess what? kids loved it, and it worked out to be great. And we had great parties and all that kind of stuff. And I was also at the time in the Rutgers band, and I became the vice president of the Rutgers band, in addition, which was in charge of recruiting and marketing and things of that nature. And I just got immersed in that and just loved it, and had a really super great time at Rutgers. And specifically, the band, I guess, was my main cohort of friends that I developed, and those have maintained through the Rutgers Alumni Band Association. And I founded the Rutgers University Alumni Wind Symphony that you alluded to in your opening. That they just celebrated their 40th anniversary this past May, and I did conduct my own composition called a Rutgers Rhapsody, which is
Wow.
comprised of the 7 most beloved songs of Rutgers. That's what that
Wow.
was that you heard. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. You also helped to found Mu Epsilon, is it? Mu
Mu Upsilon
Epsilon
Alpha.
Alpha. So you helped to found a fraternity.
Yeah, I was one of the founding brothers. We had a band service fraternity, nationwide fraternity called Kappa Kappa Psi. But remember, you had brought it up. In those days, Rutgers University was the big name, but each college within the university was its own separate entity. So I attended Rutgers College, which was all male, which was the tradition among many colleges back then, especially the Ivies and the quasi Ivies. Like Harvard was all male, but then they had, was it Radcliffe was a female college, and so Rutgers had Douglas College for their equivalent female. Anyway, they allowed 400 women into Rutgers College my senior year with 7,000 men. But they had to do it gradually, I guess. And when they allowed women in, the Rutgers University marching band, which was all male, of course, had to make a decision: do we let women in the marching band or not? And a few people said, no, they're never going to be able to march as good as us. And those of us who are more progressive, said a band member is a band member. And if they're allowed to be in the school, they're allowed to be in the band. And so we predominated and we won, and we allowed women in. And because of that, there was no equivalent band service fraternity. So when it came time to the service fraternity, we took the motto, a band member is a band member, and we turned it into a brother is a brother. And so the women became brothers in a way, and we allowed them to pledge Kappa Kappa Psi, the national fraternity. Well, guess what? The national fraternity back then was like stuck in the Stone Age, and they didn't want us to do that. They wanted us to not allow women. And so the president of Kappa Kappa Psi National came to Rutgers and met with us in person and told us that if we continued to let women be in Kappa Kappa Psi, which was against their rules, they were going to pull our charter. And we
Wow.
were one of the first. Yeah. So we said, see ya. We don't care. Bye. We are going to continue with what we feel is right. And I'm very proud of that, by the way. Back then, when we were kids, we were only in our 20s, young 20s, and we did what was right for the women that were coming into the college. And so we founded, I wasn't the main founding person. That was a young man named Greg Gamache, who was one of the big founders. He really did a lot of the technical details. And we founded our own independent Rutgers University band service fraternity called Mu Upsilon Alpha. And we still, to this day, they still have the motto, a brother is a brother. And the members all refer to themselves as brothers because we decided not to feed into that sexual discrimination division, and we treated everybody equally. And that wasn't really that popular doing that kind of thing
No,
back then.
no.
So that's I'm kind of very, and they just had their 50th anniversary last year. We did, that was in 1973, so the 50th anniversary, and I went and I was invited to speak, and I got a chance to speak along with Nick Santoro and a couple of other uh, original members got to speak. So it was very, very
Great stuff.
meaningful in my
Great
young
stuff.
life. Yeah.
It's funny, I was in a pharmacy fraternity at Rutgers
Oh,
um, back in the early days, and it was strictly men. But I checked back a few years ago, and my pharmacy fraternity is 95% women
mm,
today. The changing world that we live in. It's all, when I was in pharmacy school, there were three. When I started in '63, there were three women in the whole college. So today it must be 75, 80%, 90% women. So things change around. So when we were speaking last week, and this kind of haunts me, and I love getting haunted. Um, you told me an amazing story about lightning, a bolt of
Uh,
lightning, and how it changed your life. So tell the folks how a bolt of lightning changed your life.
it absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
1971 too, if I got the year.
1971, July 14th, 1971. I was a Boy Scout growing up, and don't forget I was only 16 when I went to college, so I was still a Boy Scout. I had gotten my Eagle Award in my senior year in high school, so I was an Eagle Scout, and then I was a junior assistant scoutmaster, and so I was also a staff member at what was called Camp Tawadena in Sussex County, New Jersey. And we had a Boy Scout camp there. And so I started there in the kitchen when I was only 15 years old, and I became a counselor, and then I became the nature director. And in 1971, I was the bugler as well. I mean, I was always the bugler because I was a trumpet player. And I had to get up early in the morning to get all washed and ready. And then I had to walk to the four corners of the camp to blow the bugle because we didn't have a loudspeaker. It was old school, and to wake up the rest of the camp. Then they'd come up the hill for flag ceremony, and we'd have flag ceremony, and then we'd have breakfast, and then the day would begin. And so I was always in bed by 11 o'clock in my cot. Now, the in Boy Scout camp, there's platforms in the forest, just right in the forest, and then there's like these tents with two upright poles and a big tent. Usually you have two people in a tent sleeping in metal cots. But because I was the oldest of the staff members, I was privileged, so I got my own tent off a little bit from away the younger staff members, and they always used to come to me and say, "Pete, come with us tonight and raid the kitchen. We're going to make tomato sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches." And I would always say, "Nope, not going, because if we get caught, we're all getting fired." And since I came from an old-fashioned Italian family, the worst thing that could happen to me would be coming home and calling my mother to come pick me up. My dad, I got fired from Boy Scout camp. So that would bring shame on my family for generations to come. So anyway, always resisted. Well, the night of July 13th, 1971, they came to me again. "Pete, come on, you never come with us. Come." So I said, "All right, all right, all right, I'll go." So I went. And in those days, because we were in the camp for many years, we could tell where the stars were, that we walked through the fields, and we didn't bring flashlights because it was a well-lit night and we could see. So we get there, and sure enough, we break in, and we're making tomato sandwiches and having fun, just being kids. We weren't doing anything nasty or anything, just, being naughty. In those days, naughty meant making sandwiches when you weren't supposed to. And all of a sudden, this horrible lightning storm comes through. We could just hear it rumbling. And if you know about the Kittatinny Ridge in New Jersey, it comes rumbling over the ridge, and we're not at we're at the middle point between the ridge, and then there's us, and then there's the lake down at the bottom. Anyway, this storm comes in, and it's 2:30 in the morning. We're still trapped in there. We couldn't get back to our tents. It was 2:30. And I was getting cold. We're getting cold. So I crawled underneath the serving thing, and I lit a match to start a fire so we could warm up just with boxes. And the minute I lit the match in the kitchen, the phone rings. So the phone rings. It's an intra camp phone. So I mean, somebody from in the camp was calling the kitchen, and we're like, "Oh no!" I'm like, "Oh, I heard the phone, and I blew out the match." And I'm saying, "Oh no, the camp director caught us. We're dead meat. I'm gonna get fired." My life started passing before my eyes, and all of a sudden, in the kitchen, there's this huge commotion, and they start screaming, "Staff area is on fire!
Wow.
Staff area is on fire! Staff area is on fire!" That kind of thing, and they all ran out like a bat out of hell. Took me a little while to catch up to them, and as I'm running across the field in the rain, I see this big orange glow in the sky. And I'm like, "Oh no," my heart sinks. And I'm worried about, I'm older now, I'm 18, whatever it is. And I'm worried about a forest fire starting. And so what I did is, instead of going right to where I could see it was my tent. When I got close, I'm like, "Oh my God, it's my tent." So instead of going there, I made another right turn, and I went to the headquarters building where the firefighting apparatus was stored. And I put on what's called an Indian tank. It looks like a backpack, big one, and it's full of water. It's actually quite heavy. And it has a pump thing anyway, I ran over there and got the fire out. And I got told the other kids, I kind of took charge and to yank the hose out of the washstand, and we used the hose from the washstand, and we got the fire out. But so then there was a big, as you can imagine, a big shock. We got the scoutmaster, the camp director came up, and they were like, "Oh my God," and they were glad I wasn't killed, because had I been in my bed at 11 o'clock, the lightning went through my tent, through my cot. It hit my trumpet, which was in its case. I also had a metal desk two metal bird cages, my metal cot, a metal clothing rod upon which I had metal hangers. So I was like a big vortex of metal, and that's what attracted the lightning. And
Wow.
I would have absolutely been killed. And I didn't have time to think of this when I was putting out the fire. And then they took me down the hill to where the lake and the camp director's cabin was. They said, "You stay here tonight. We have to call your parents in the morning." So anyway, took care of that. We get back to the tent area with the burned out platform and all my stuff. And then I see my trumpet cracked in half at
Wow.
the bottom of all the charred stuff. And that's when it hit me. It's like, oh, and then I know it's going to sound like maybe a corny analogy, but this is what I've said. I said, I felt the hand of God tapping me on my shoulder saying, "Hey, buddy boy, fun and games are over. It's
Wow.
time to look at why you're here, who you are, why are you here, and what is the here anyway." So all of a sudden, boom, I got woken up into my new spiritual consciousness,
Wow.
but I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew I had to find out. And so I became a spiritual seeker at that time.
That,
That's when,
what a powerful event.
oh yeah.
To think about
Huge.
that.
And my poor mom, oh my God. My mom was always the kind where don't forget this is back in the this is back in the 60s now. Early 70s, sorry. But she was always the kind that was afraid of lightning. So when lightning went on, the blinds come down, you couldn't take a shower, you couldn't be on the phone, yada. So imagine me calling my mom to tell her
Mhm.
that I
Wow.
almost got killed by lightning. You know, I told the first thing I said is, "Mom, something happened, but I'm okay." And then she was, "Okay, what happened?" And then she was like,
Wow.
"Ah." So they came up that day and brought me clothes. I didn't have any clothes. I was just the clothes I was wearing was all
Yeah,
that's
it fascinates me that that event, and you know, you're still a young guy. I mean, really young, that began to redirect your whole view of the world. Um,
yep.
so now I'm going to interject a heavy question, whether it fits or not. But that made you think, that event made you think, and at that point, did you begin to question why do we exist on Earth?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
everything. I mean, everything came flooding into me like all these questions that I had no answer for,
Okay.
that I had no knowledge of. I didn't even know where to look. And then, bingity bangity boom, camp's over. I mean, I stayed in camp the whole rest of the summer, and then I'm back at college. And so then other things progressed from there.
Okay. So, uh, you remember that TV show, This Is Your Life?
I don't remember that so much.
His name was Ralph Edwards.
Okay.
And he used to have a show. He'd bring a celebrity on, and you have mystery voices, and behind the curtain and
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
This is your life. You may have, I'm sure you saw it because we grew up to that show. But
Yeah.
anyway, this is like This Is Your Life. So they had the bow lightning, and you start questioning things. And this really fascinates me about you. You entered a yoga monastery, which was called an ashram, and you studied the path of the yoga from an American Swami, if I'm getting these words right.
Pretty
Uh,
much, yeah. Hmm.
so talk about that. You go into, I mean, that's heavy duty stuff, Peter.
Yeah. Well, now this was 1971, so it was the summer between my sophomore and junior years in college. And so when I got back to college, I just started reading and I started trying to find books and and my roommate was into yoga, Rudy Becker. He's still my best friend to this day. And we were in Demarest dorm, and we had another guy, and one of our good friends, Ned Teeple, was doing yoga every day. So I became aware in my periphery about this thing called yoga. And my roommate Rudy had been to a yoga retreat, which I didn't even know such a thing existed. So he had been to a yoga retreat and run by a Swami called Swami Satchidananda. Many of your listeners will probably know that name. And so, meanwhile, we used to get the Rutgers Targum, which is the newspaper. It was a daily newspaper at Rutgers run by students every day. They made a new copy. It wasn't just a week; it was every single day. And so I was religious reader of that, and I used to like the Peanuts comic strip and all that was in it. And I saw this yoga retreat in the Pocono Mountains, and it was like $30 for the whole week. Even back then, that was crazy. And I was a member at the time of the Rutgers University Jazz Ensemble. And we had already made plans to go to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba to perform for the service people
Wow.
from the federal government, the Department of State, whatever, was sponsoring our trip. I already got my shots, inoculation, and like 2 weeks before we're getting ready to go during spring break, would have been March, they canceled the trip, and we never found out why. We just found out you're not going, and I'm like, oh, now I got nothing to do on my spring break, but I got $40 that I saved up, that I have just had. I was going to spend at the commissary, whatever, and then I see this ad, and I didn't think anything about it, and I threw it away. And then my roommate comes back and he says, "Hey, I'm going on a yoga retreat over the break by Satchidananda. He's running, Swami Satchidananda is running another retreat." I said, "Really?" I said, "Well," he goes, "Yeah, it's only like $100." He said, "That's amazing." And I said, "Well, I just saw one in the Targum at another place in the Poconos for $30." He goes, "Are you kidding?" I said, "No." So guess what we did? We went out into the middle of the between the sections of the dorm with the garbage cans, right? We went through the garbage cans, and after like the fifth garbage can, we found the Targum from a couple of days ago where the ad was. And so he decides to go to that. Then he says to me, "You're not going to Cuba anymore. Why don't you come too?" And it's only $30. And I had 40. So I said, okay. So I went, he drove, and we're driving down the road, and we get to where the yoga ashram was supposed to be. But I, in my mind, as most people do, you project what it's going to look like. And I'm thinking it's going to be like temples, and people are going to be wearing white robes and looking all holy and things. I didn't know. So there's this little chubby woman in a field with a horse talking with another young person, and there's just this stone building, but there's a circle, and the circle has the logo. But we figured it was just a pathway on the way. Turns out that was actually the place. And the lady in the field, just wearing regular clothes in the mud, was my eventual guru or teacher, Swami Lakshmi Devi. And that's how I got involved with going to the yoga ashram. And I had learned, it was March 18th, 1972, Saturday, until March 25th. I'll never forget those dates. That's still a holy week in my life, because that's where my life changed forever. And so after 3 days being there and going through the program, and I learned more about myself in those first 3 days than I had learned about myself in my entire life before that. No kidding.
Wow.
And so I knew at the time that I had to follow this path and continue learning from this woman.
Wow.
And that's what I did. And I went back to Rutgers, and, I was all excited about it, and just was all of my everything was just. I finally had a handle on my coffee cup. The coffee cup being my search for, but I didn't know what to do. I finally found a teacher that was actually a Swami who had learned from another Swami who had learned from a very famous Swami in India named Swami Shivananda. And by the way, Swami Satchidananda was also one of his students. Anyway, that's how I got involved.
Oof. Wow. All right. Off topic, just a
Mhm.
little break from heaviness. Um, uh, and you don't have to answer this, but I like this question. It's one of my favorite questions to ask. So here's the deal, and it could be a couple answers, whatever. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with.
This is going to sound corny, and I was raised as a Catholic, but I don't practice any religion now. I believe in spirituality, and I respect the proper function of religion, but not when religious people use it for either political or, war, fighting wars in the name of God. But I would like to spend a day with Jesus as a person, as a human being. Sit on a bench, have lunch, go for a walk, and just talk with him. Not worship him, respect him, of course, like I would anybody, like I respect you. But I'd like to spend the day with the actual real Jesus and talk about real actual things and learn whatever I
Yeah.
could learn.
And learn and learn. It's a great answer. And if somebody asked me that, that might have popped up as an answer for me. Uh, and that's a whole another story, my relationship. But anyway, great answer. And I agree that that would be beyond amazing. So, back to work. Um, this is one of my favorite questions. Uh, I love this because it's so provocative, and I always feel like I'm one of these things. Um, um, what does being a radar dish mean to you?
It means being absolutely receptive as opposed to projective. Most people spend their lives with their energy going out of themselves, and we call that ego. And ego is not necessarily bad, although we know it can be bad. But we've all been like, now the new term Karens and, helicopter parents and pushy people, and even in the quiet-minded people, there's an attachment to the external world, and that's because of the senses. The five senses are a delivery system to deliver the information about the physical world, the molecular physical universe, into our mind, which is housed in the brain. The brain is an organ, but it's not the mind. It's the home of the mind, kind of like a computer. A computer has a hard drive, but it's the electricity that gives purpose and ability to the computer to do its job. And so spirit, or the actual mind, is what gives life to the brain. So can you re-ask that question one time? Just I got off track in my head here.
Oh, what does being a
Oh yeah, being a
radar
radar
dish
dish.
mean
Sorry, yeah.
to you?
So what yoga has taught me, and what I've learned isn't just not unique to yoga, is how to be the art of being receptive. And that's really, it's just like my teacher used to say, Swami Lakshmi Devi would say, and she was right. He said, you can't pour water into a garden hose if there's water streaming out of it. You can't do the same. You have to turn off the water. You have to let it retreat somewhat down in the hose, and then you can gently pour from whatever into that hose. She said that's what it's like in meditation and living on the earth in a receptive, mm, radar dish type of style, is to let go of the projective mind, stop doing the projective thinking outwardly, detach somewhat through. There's certain different yogic techniques of breathing. You experienced one recently when we had a class together, of stilling the mind, and just letting that water, so to speak, retreat back into that hose, which is us. And then the universe can pour water gently, or information gently, into our mind. And so that's what I've learned how to do many years ago. And it's like cutting the grass. You don't just learn something once in life and then let it go. You have to keep doing it in order to have it be, like if you're even playing tennis. So you learn how to play tennis and you're good. You can't just, you got to get out there and play tennis a couple times a month or week or something to keep your skills up. And it's the same thing with learning a clarinet or a trumpet or meditation, or to become equanimity. Yogis seek for a mind of equanimity. We try to get away from the ups and downs, the emotional highs and lows, highs and lows. A lot of people thrive on that. But yogis like to have an equanimitous mind so that we can see and perceive the world, illusion though it is, meaning it's molecular. We want to see it as clearly as possible, especially the emotions. We want to not be rattled or thrown off by the emotion. So by being a radar dish, what I do is I just open up, widen back, and allow things to come into me without judgment, just by observing and feeling and letting them come in. So and I do that all the time now. I'm doing it right now. When I'm out in public, I can see people. I know who's in pain. I can tell who's suffering. I can tell who's happy. It doesn't take long. And I was a teacher most of my life, and it really came in handy there because I could really zone in on the kids. And as I'm teaching, I'm also receiving the reflection from their minds. And because I'm a radar dish, I'm getting that reflection back. So I'm projecting, but I'm also receiving. And as I'm watching them, I'm watching their eyes, I'm feeling their energy, I'm looking at their body language, and I can see if I'm connecting or not. And if I'm not connecting properly, I switch gears. I do something different until I reach that point of connectivity. So it's a great tool. Now, like any tool, like a hammer, you can use it for great things or you can kill people with it. So if you have this power and ability to be a radar dish, to be very receptive, what comes with it is a great response. With great power comes great responsibility. I could very easily have manipulated people my entire life. Like, not a problem. I could have done that my entire life, but I made an actual vow to serve humanity, not the other way around. And so, as a servant of humanity, I've never once manipulated people. I mean, if somebody has an ugly baby, I'm not going to say, hey, your baby's ugly. Nobody does that, right? So you have to temper with reality. So I say, oh, what a cute baby, Am I lying? Yes. Am I? But I'm trying to be as compassionate, and I'm looking at the bigger picture, which is I want to give love to this lady or this guy about their baby. I'm not going to say their baby's ugly, right? So anyway, that's part of being a radar dish, is it helps me and it helps everybody who does it to learn how to better interact with other human beings and animals too. I mean, this works great with animals. I mean, gosh, crazy, because animals are just sentient beings. They just can't talk, and they don't have all the capacity that we do, but they have many of the same emotional feelings.
Wow. I love this. I loved your answer. I identify with it. I sometimes view myself, we talked about it, as being a bit of a radar dish, a receiver, because so much of my life, I've been, these last 20 years, my whole life has changed from working for VECCHIO for 25 years to becoming a novelist and journalist. And it's because I was a receiver.
Mm.
And I was getting, and then when you realize, at least for me, that you're receiving, then the more you open, the more you get. So,
Yeah.
they give you a little bit, and if it works out, they give you a little bit more and a little bit more, as long as you can kind of handle it. It's funny, in all my meditations, and to the spirit that's been hanging around me, I sometimes I talk just like I'm talking to you right now,
Hmm.
just plain matter of factly speech. And I would always say, I love everything that's been happening to me. I love being a receiver. I love the energies of the universe. I love the connection that we have. But do me a favor, never materialize. I don't need that. Just leave our relationship like it is. I don't want to see you because I don't know how I'll handle that. And that's just the way I talk, and but anyway, next is this, the art of being human.
Mm.
Um, Channeled writings and commentaries of an American spiritualist, which is you. So let's talk all about this, where it came from, where you can get it, what it's about. Uh, um, and I've started, I've started, by the way, I listened to you. So, you had given me that Dolores Cannon book to read.
Yeah, Keepers of the Garden.
Yeah, yeah. So I started that, and I have this now. So you're filling up my cup. So talk all about this part of you, your journey to that.
Well, so I used to sit for meditation every single day, and I would oftentimes have my own journal. I keep a journal. I don't keep it as active right now, but I have for the most of my life kept a journal, and it's a nice hardcover, folio size thing. And I would always, write my innermost thoughts. That was part of the spiritual teaching that I learned from my teacher. Because when you get things out of your head, it's like furniture. If you want to buy new furniture, before you put it in the living room, you have to get rid of the old furniture. Then you can put the new furniture in. You have a place to put it. Well, same thing with our thoughts, especially our deep thoughts. When we get them out and we create a flow and get them out of our head, we then create more of a siphoning where we draw more energy into ourselves and more, not just thoughts, but realizations and things of that nature. Growth-oriented thoughts and growth-oriented images can then move in. So I would meditate every day and then write in my journal. And as I started, and I met a lady named Phyllis Givens in New Hope, Pennsylvania, right across from Lambertsville, New Jersey. And she ran a healing store called Hemetro, and Hemetro was a take on the name Hermes, who is a healer. And so she had all herbs and all kind of healing things there. So I started learning from her, and I had psychic readings from her. And then she started teaching me how to become a channel. And what a channel is like that radar dish. It's like, but you're actually focusing on opening up and then listening to whatever is given. Funny, her name was Givens, Phyllis Givens. And so I started doing that. And so I'd sit after meditation, I started actually channeling stuff. And as I was learning to channel, as most channeling students do, I would question it. I said, well, what if this is me just, and they said, well, it doesn't matter. It's not hurting you. So just continue and see what happens. And so that's what happened. So all the book, The Art of Being Human, consists of 22 chapters, 20 of which consist of channeled writings, which I did after my meditations. And then I put after each one of them a channeled commentary, hence the subtitle, Channeled Writings and Commentaries. And so I did that. And the last two chapters, one's an epilogue, and the last one is a special poem that I called My Loving Soul. And that comprises, I believe, chapter 22. Um, and and so I started, doing this channeling, and the book came about because I felt I wanted to. I'm a teacher at my heart. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher in school. I've been a teacher in the Boy Scouts. I've been a symphonic conductor, and so I do. That's all kind of teaching. And when I think of teaching, I don't think of top down. I think of sharing. I know this because of my experiences. You don't. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to share it with you. And that's what we call teaching. I've never been I never thought, oh, I'm a teacher, I'm better than you. I never had that approach ever. I'm a sharer, but nobody calls us sharers anymore. We just call teachers. So I've got to the point where I wanted to share. So I decided to put it in book form, and I self-published 400 copies, took it to the printer, and they printed it locally, and it had a plain flesh-colored cover and the title, which is there, and wasn't Isbin or anything like that, had no numbers. And they sold out I gave away half of them and sold half of them. And then I did another printing, and then I did this more professional looking third printing with a company at the time called Airleaf Publishing. And so that's how the book came about. And I channeled, by the way, when I was writing the channeled, remember, I already had the channeled writings from my meditation journal. And so when I was writing the commentaries, I got to be so adept at channeling that I actually figured out the measurements for what each page would look like. And I set my computer with those parameters on the computer, and I just channeled the book right then and there. And so what you're holding in your hand, maybe 90% of it, as 95% of it was never even changed. I just
Wow.
channeled it right into the book, right into the book. And because when I do channeling, I don't like to mess with it. It's like if somebody gives you a gift, are you going to criticize it? And oh, I think it's blah, blah. No, you're going to hopefully be humble and receive the gift and appreciate the fact that somebody cared enough about you to give you something. And so that's the way I look at channeling. To me, it's a gift, truly. And so I don't, and by the way, here's another thing that's going to blow your mind. All composers, all really good composers are channels. They receive, you think Beethoven didn't come up with all that stuff just on his own. Sorry. No, he had help. Bach, all those people. And I'm a composer, so I can tell you there's a process of what I like to call downloading, where you just open up. A psychic once told me that my channeling abilities are like a sink full of water. And when I'm ready, I just pull out the stopper, boom, and it all comes down. It downloads, and that's kind of what it's like. And so composers, I first learned that I was a channel by realizing I was channeling, I was composing. And that's what kind of, so the channeling of words actually came later. The channeling of music came first, but I didn't know it was called that at the time.
Wow. Uh, this will be available soon on Amazon, Audible.
Yes, I had it. The one you're holding in your hand, you did get that from Amazon, and you must have bought it from an independent, because I used to have a little store on there where I had it on, and then they changed their rules and whatever. And so, but I've recently am working on, and it should be available hopefully by the beginning of 2025, um, a hardcover version, print on demand through Amazon. Soft cover will be available, print on demand, and I still have copies as well. And then I've already recorded all the chapters for Audible, and that's going to be produced on Audible. And I have also authorized the a Kindle version for ebook, and that's what's going to be happening.
Perfect. Perfect. By the way, Audible is headquartered in Newark.
Really, had no idea.
The guy who started Audible is not a Newarker, but he fell in love with the city of Newark and he headquartered it in Newark. I think his last name is Katz, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
And he just loves everything about Newark. And of
cool.
course, he recently sold to Amazon for a lot of money, but he's still there. I tried to channel him. It hasn't worked yet. So
Okay.
be it. Okay, the last bit of sometimes you save the best to last. Let's talk about your work with the New Jersey School of Conservation, which
Okay.
you told me before we went on air is the second largest school of conservation in the world.
Yes.
The work you're doing there, and what's going to happen on September 14th. People won't be able to see it, but it's going to be embedded You have a day-long observing nature inward and outward, which is an amazing event, truly an amazing event to experience that in the mountains of New Jersey and Sussex County. So talk about your involvement. And, I mean, this is of all the things, I believe this is on such a high level because it's our home,
Hmm.
and our home
Oh yeah.
is undergoing terrible degradation, and it's our species who are going to be affected. But anyway, talk about school and talk about this event.
Well, in my life, the three most important triads of my, I guess I'd like to call them the three legs of my stool, the triads, is spirituality, music, and nature. Those three energies, those three subjects, those three powerful entities form the most important triad that exists in my life, and they're interweaved throughout my entire life. Hence my involvement with the Boy Scouts, being a camp counselor, being the nature director, being a trumpet player, and music and all that stuff. So, and then spirituality happened. So, my connection with the New Jersey School of Conservation started in September of 1969. Guess how? Because of Rutgers. Because the Rutgers University Marching Band held their band camp at the New Jersey School of Conservation.
Wow.
So as a young freshman, I'm at Rutgers. We get on the bus, boomity boomity boom. All of a sudden, we're in the New Jersey School of Conservation, working our butts off for a week, learning all the show and the music and all that. So, and then I go back the next year, and then I was also, don't forget, concurrently the nature director at the Boy Scout camp where the lightning happened. That was in the summer as opposed to the fall. And what happened was, it just so happened it had nothing to do with my fire, but the Boy Scouts wound up selling my camp. And that was a horrible experience for people because it was like our summer forest home where we did a lot of our growing up. So 1971 was actually the last year that Camp Tawadena was open. And then I went to Dr. John Kirk, who was the then executive director of the New Jersey School of Conservation. He had gotten his degrees from the University of Michigan, as did Dr. Scott Whitener, who was the conductor of the Rutgers Marching Band. Whitener had made the arrangements with Dr. Kirk to have band camp at the New Jersey School of Conservation. So I just got to see who he was and everything. And after my camp closed, I still had another summer to go before I was going to graduate. And I wanted to work in a camp. So I figured, hey, that's a nature camp. So I contacted Dr. Kirk. He invited me to come up for an interview. I sat down with him. He's a legend, by the way, up there. He was the executive director for like 35 years. And he hired me to be a counselor at Camp Wapelani, which is the name of the summer camp at the New Jersey School of Conservation. And that's how I first got involved with them. So during the summer of 1972, I was a counselor at the Camp Wapelani School at New Jersey School of Conservation, and that's how I first. Okay, so fast forward. Oh, and then on my days off, well, one day a week, I would drive to the yoga ashram, where I was still in the process of learning from my Swami Lakshmi Devi guru lady. So all this is kind of interwoven, and so then of course I was there again for Rutgers band camp, etc. Anyway, all the years pass and time goes, and I get this invitation that they're going to celebrate their 70th anniversary in October of 2019. Yeah, 2019. Well, that was also my 50th high school reunion. So I was up in Jersey for the high school reunion, which was also October, and I wound up going to this 70th anniversary reunion. And then COVID happened. That was 2019, right? The
Right.
fall. And then what happened? Early 2020, COVID, boom, right? And then Montclair University, which had been the steward of the New Jersey School of Conservation for a long time, just one day decided they're not interested anymore. And with no warning whatsoever, with 4 months warning, they just shut it down. And this venerable institution
Wow.
began to lie fallow.
Wow.
It's the acreage, I forget how many hundred acres there, and the lake, it's called Lake Wapelani, as a matter of fact, is owned by the Department of Environmental Protection, the New Jersey DEP. And so, and Dr. Kirk had since passed away right before pretty much before the 70th anniversary. Well, there was an organization had been started years before called the Friends of the New Jersey School of Conservation. And one of the people that was highly involved in that was Dr. Kirk's daughter, Kerry Kirk. Her married name is Flew, Pflugh. So Kerry Kirk Flew. Anyway, Kerry was a camper when I was a counselor in 1972. She's a little younger than me. And so she was the president of the Friends of the New Jersey School of Conservation, and they got their act together and started gearing up. And what they did is they essentially, long story short, they saved the School of Conservation. And it just so happens that Kerry, I believe, was working at the DEP at the time. That was her job. She was working in an office there at the DEP. I don't know exactly what she did, but anyway, she they got a whole marketing thing together. They called up senators, they called the state legislature, they got in touch with Governor Murphy, I believe it is. And long story short is that they were able to enact daytime programs, but they couldn't do anything overnight. They couldn't serve food. It was very limited. And when they started doing that, I had already then been replugged in from the 70th anniversary. And I had become friendly again with Kerry and another woman named Shane Russell, who's very active as the vice president there of the organization. And I came up with this idea to use the grounds of the New Jersey School of Conservation, which is pristine, pure nature in New Jersey, only less than an hour from New York City, pretty much, about an hour. And I developed this program called Observing Nature Inward and Outward. The idea is human nature is the inward. And by using my yogic techniques of deep relaxation, yogic breathing, pranayama, to create an altered state of consciousness without drugs, by like you experienced on Tuesday, with drawing the energy and the focus inward, a la the radar dish, but going deeper inward, actually much deeper. And then by gently opening up the eyes, and then we would walk into the forest in silence, keeping that same meditative energy, being fed and strengthened by the pure essence of the forest, unspoiled forest. Very powerful, incredibly powerful. And so the idea was then we'd explore nature outward. So first we explored nature inward. And we also used my book as a guiding tool for the teaching sessions and the meditation sessions that took place during the daily schedule. And then we went and we observed nature outward, meaning the physical manifestation of nature. And then as part of that program, I introduced the very simple use of cell phone photography. Because if you think about it, we're using our inner focus to focus inwardly, to slow ourselves down, to become more receptive, to become more equanimitous, as I've talked about before, equanimity. And then we go into the forest, which deepens that experience. And then imagine taking your cell phone, all while functioning individually in the forest, and taking that awareness to a plant or a flower or an acorn or whatever it is, whatever, a feather that's on it, whatever. And so then would have the people send me their 5 most favorite photographs, and I'd put them electronically, and we do a little slideshow, and people could share their experience. They loved it. It's just a hit. And so this year is the 3rd year we're running the program. And the previous 2 programs were overnight, had the option of overnight. It was a little complicated because a lot of people can't spend both days. So this year we decided, let's just try it for one day, no overnight, 9:30 to 5:30, boom, we're done. Bring your own lunch. Very simple, $99 for the whole day. And all the teaching, all the experience, and that in the forest. And that's what we're doing, September 14th.
Wow. And I hope to be there.
Yes, you are going to be our
Uh,
journalist with a press
I,
pass on the
yeah,
ground.
I
Plus,
hope to be there.
you also get to be a human being and experience it yourself, in
Yeah,
addition to being the
yeah.
journalist. So I
Somewhere
hope
along the line, I read a while back ago that plants and trees are somewhat sentient. They feel.
they are, they
And
are. But it
um,
takes a very still mind. That radar dish has really got to be working at a high level to feel that energy. But you
yeah,
can feel it.
we have a tree. I don't even know what kind it is, right next to the house, and I love that tree, and it's grown so tall, and I fight with my wife all the time. Don't just let it grow. Just leave it alone. Don't trim it. And And
Mhm.
sometimes I put my fingers on the leaves and close my eyes and just kind of send vibes. I mean, that's my own, because
Are you familiar with Kirlian photography?
no.
Kirlian, Kirlean, named after a person, I think. Kirlean, Kirlian photography. It was actually developed in the latter part of the 20th century. It's a way of actually photographing the actual psychic energy. The psychic energy. I'm using my hand to represent a plant, and you can see energy coming out of the plant. And it's not just a glow, it's an actual energy force that changes. So it shows that that plant actually has a living energy force within it. They've
Wow.
also done many experiments with playing classical music versus like heavy metal music. And I'm not trying to insult heavy metal fans, but plants don't like it. And so the plants would not grow well in the heavy metal music, but they would thrive with Bach or Beethoven or Mozart. And
Wow.
the same thing with talking to plants, acknowledging their existence, speaking with them. Um, I have three gigantic tomato plants that are about 8 feet tall in my backyard. I mean, in my back porch. I grow them in big pots. And I've had some tomato hornworm caterpillars, the big green kind that really eat them. And I've caught a couple, but they're really hard to see because they're perfectly camouflaged. So last about 4 days ago, I went out there and in a full voice, just like this, I said, tomato hornworm caterpillars, you must reveal yourself because I'm not going to kill you and I'm not going to harm you, but you may no longer eat my tomato plants. And I did this repetitively. Well, I found three hornworm caterpillars that day. Now, they didn't hold up their little paws and say, here I am, but they became visible to me
Wow.
because I addressed, I believe, it's my instinct. Because I was looking for these guys for a long time. I knew they were there because you could see the little poops and you could see where they had eaten, but they're so well camouflaged, they look just like a tomato stem. And your viewers that listen, if you know, if they grow tomatoes, they'll know what I'm talking about. The tomato hornworm, they get to be about the size of my finger. And they're pretty big.
Great.
A little tiny tail. That's why it's called a hornworm. And they turn into a sphinx moth, which is really beautiful, almost like a hummingbird. Anyway, I found these three caterpillars. And this morning I did it again. I did it again. I went out there. I said, because I could see there was more eating. And I induced them, and I found one right away. And I didn't, I promised, I fulfilled my promise. I didn't kill it. I didn't harm it. I simply put it in a way that it could never get back to my tomato plants, and it's got its own karma.
Wow. Interesting, interesting, interesting. So we've come to the end of session one with
Okay.
Peter Del Vecchio. More to come. I cannot thank you enough
Hey,
for,
by the way,
yes.
sorry, could I just have a little time to talk a little bit at the end?
Yeah, talk.
Not
Yes,
other,
I'm just winding down. Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
before you wind down all the way, I just want to first
Sure.
of all thank everybody. I want to thank you. And I want to thank everybody who took the time to watch this. But I also want to say that there's a lot of pain and suffering out there in the world, and most of it is unnecessary. The reason I say it's unnecessary is because people are not taught the technique, the simple technique. Just like there's a technique to learning how to play the clarinet or the trumpet, there's a technique to learning about oneself inside, and anybody can do it. But not everybody, most people are not aware of it. So we wander through life. Some of us question life. There's much too much suicide in life. People see the world, but they don't know how to deal with the world. They can't handle the energies of the world. Nobody teaches them how to deal with their emotions. Nobody teaches them how to be equanimitous of mind so they don't have the highs and the lows and this manic kind of lifestyle. And my function as I see it is to help people learn about themselves and how they function and work as a human creature, as a human being, because we all have a lot in common. And so my goal and my job and my offering and why I'm so grateful to Cal is that I have an opportunity here to speak to people and maybe untie some of those knots, or maybe give people a little handle on their coffee cup. If the coffee cup is life and it's a little too hot, we just need a little handle on. And that handle is knowledge. Education is so important. So I just wanted to say that before you
Great.
give your closing. Thank you so much.
Uh, Thank you, Peter. And by the way, thank the gods of the internet for letting us finish this.
Yes.
We had some difficulty getting started. So I'm inviting you to come back, and you will come back in different shapes and forms. Maybe Gathering of the Light. We talk about that. It's just so fascinating. Your world, your journey, so fascinating. the elements of spirituality and giving back are so much a part of what I do. So we have this great simpatico, this great synchronicity. Besides being, by the way, Rutgers won last night in football.
Oh,
It was really nice. It was a nice victory, and I see things. I portent of things to come. I haven't said this in decades, but it's a nice football team. We'll see.
good.
We'll see. Hey, actually they're playing Virginia Tech. Are you near Virginia Tech?
Yeah. When are they playing? Are they
Okay.
playing? Are they playing down here?
Yeah, yeah.
You should come down. We'll go to the game.
Hey, well, I think it's September 27th. Um,
Okay.
and what's the city that's in Blackwood
Blacksburg.
or
Blacksburg.
Blacksburg?
Blacksburg.
Yeah.
Exit 118 on Route 81 South.
Hey, we'll talk
I
about it.
exit. I live
That
by exit 188.
that's probably maybe the biggest game of the season for them because
Really?
Virginia Tech is good, and if they think they're good, then they're going to have to win.
Yeah.
So
So
we'll
Rutgers is gonna. It's an away game for Rutgers. They're coming
yes,
down here.
yes.
Wow. I'm gonna hook up with the band director, the Rutgers band director, and
Yep,
Julia.
September 27th.
All right. I'm gonna. I'll check my calendar later.
Yep.
But so my invitation is you're welcome to come down and stay at my house.
I appreciate that. We'll see what my eyes let me do.
Mm,
I'll get my eyes
mm.
fixed up. We'll see. In the old Calvin, I would have been there in 2 seconds. I just have to take it a day at a time. But anyway, this was great. And there's another great word I like to use. This time that we spent together was sumptuous.